Evening, everybody. Glad that you're joining us here tonight, whether you catch us on the flip side where we come back via video or MP3 audio, whichever. We're glad that you joined us here tonight. Episode 227 of Warp and Woof Radio. And this summer and fall, I've been having a grand old time interviewing former students who are out in the world doing wonderful, good things. I'm just always impressed by what folks are doing. And tonight we have a special treat for everybody that's watching. We have Barry Walton, a filmmaker, joining us here tonight. Barry has had so many different experiences. I can't wait for you to hear from him what they've all been. But he has won an Emmy. He's got 3 documentaries on Amazon Prime. He has worked with Nat Geo, Animal Planet, NHL, NBA. I mean, seriously, this man has been there and done that all over the world, actually, on boats and on land. So, we've got you coming and going in various vehicles, Barry. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Oh, well, I couldn't be happier to be here. I'm honored to be here. This is great.
That's great. Well, look, why don't we just talk about where you and I know each other from, and then we'll launch into all the rest of what you're doing here today. You and I go back to the Michigan days. Why don't you tell everybody where that connection was?
Yeah, Michigan, small town kid, grew up in Michigan, and I today when we talked earlier, I mentioned to you about a book that I wrote as a kid in 5th grade. And I don't know if I met you in 5th grade. I definitely met you in junior high. I had a course with you, and you were one of the more memorable teachers. One, because of your style, but the one, and I've mentioned you this before, but obviously your audience doesn't know this, was the film that you introduced, and also the critique that you went through. One of my favorite films was the Mosquito Coast, or was it The Mosquito Coast? I don't remember. With Harrison Ford, and just the whole arc of that story, and watching that in class and doing it in a way that we could enjoy was something that I had not had in previous years. I felt like I was my official entrance into growing up as in junior high. I finally had a class where I could watch a movie in class. So, that was, yeah, exactly. That was our intro, and probably an intro in supporting my interest in film and my love of this industry. But that was kind of our intro, and then it kind of evolved over the years from that.
You have come a long way, man. I mean, you've done so many interesting things. Why don't you tell everybody where it really got started? I mean, when you started really honestly shooting video and doing the whole movie thing, at least it morphed into movies after that. Tell everybody how it got started for you.
Well, that's a good question. I have a close friend, Brian Lehman. You might know Brian Lehman.
Sure.
Yeah, Brian Lehman. He grew up down the street from me. I could throw I'd have to throw a stone pretty far, but we lived in the country, so it was about a half a block down, but it was the next house. And Brian and I were classic adventurers. And in little, when you're living it in your life, you don't recognize it. But he'll call me up now, and he'll tell me about different stories that we did, adventuring through the woods, and G.I. Joe and our dad's Vietnam combat uniforms, and exploring the world. And that was kind of an introduction into a part of my life that I love, and I still try to live today, which is that adventurous side. And so I took post-college, and my adventure took me out to California. Well, California was about the film industry, but the film industry seemed very superficial. And so I delved into travel and sports and ocean sports and seeing the world, but I still loved telling story. And so I kept looking for how I can make that connection. And for between my 20s, and this is a value to anyone in their 20s that might see this, was a lot of indecision, because I wanted to contribute to the world. I wanted to give something back, and I felt like the film industry was just so shallow. It was all, and I was working in commercial film industry, so it was about selling L'Oreal hairspray. It was about, and then I was working with the biggest names. I was, at the time, this was '99, I was working with Jennifer Lopez. I was working with Will Smith. and I got a great story about Will Smith, who is a really great guy. And I screwed up on one of his shoots, and he had all of his crew behind. I forgot to push a button, and I was the instant replay for the studio, and the guy who was training me had walked away, and I forgot to push a button, and he came, "Hey man, can I see that back?" Your crew were all behind me, and I was like, and he literally goes, he could tell I was panicking. He could tell I couldn't figure out how to do it. I was an apprentice in my 20s. And he tapped me on the shoulder and he goes, "Don't worry about it, man." And they went off. Super cool, Won me. I was instantly a fan. I'm like, all right, Will Smith's all right with me, man. And so, but for me, I wasn't satiated. I just was just too, I don't want to discount people that do that work. I think they work hard. They're passionate. They're great artists that care about what they do. But I wanted something more. And so that's my dog. All right. Grab the dog, please. Sorry about that. That'll be an outtake. Well, we're live. Anyways, my wife and son are hanging out in his bedroom. So from there I migrated. I went back to education for a little while, and I was working in special education, and that was a little bit too deep in helping people. It was exhausting and pulled so much from me. So I went back and forth. Ended up doing work with Nat Geo and Animal Planet, which was really exciting because I was connecting with real people. I was telling their stories. I was working hard to tell their stories. And that's when my love of making documentary films started. And I at that time I flew off, and I'm kind of just running right over the top of all this, but just for a brief history, that's when I ran off and did my first shoot following ultra runners in Hawaii and chasing through that. And then that led into one of my biggest accomplishments, which was the High, which was in India and the Himalayas, where I filmed ultra runners running over the 2 highest peaks in the world. And literally, I try to chase alongside of these athletes, and they're unknown names, and I have highest regard for those types of people because they're unknown names, and yet they put so much into their sport. And they had ran, I remember at one point, so the first peak is 18,300 feet. That's Tenglang La. And then you come down to 11,000 feet in the city of Leh. And then you run a valley for some 60 miles before you start to climb the second peak, which is, Kardung La is the first peak. Tenglang La, and they pronounce it in that region, Donglang La is the second peak. And they had ran 24 hours all night, and they were into 80 miles. And I was trying to run next to them at times with the camera. I couldn't keep up. That's how fast they were still running. This was over a decade ago. I was mid 30s. I was in good shape. I had actually trained to go to this. So that's just kind of a fun outtake, of life experience. So I filmed that, and that kind of rolled into 2. And then prior to that and all that in the background, when I first started doing it, before I started with Nat Geo, and the job that got me with Nat Geo, and I think this can be used as a something that a token that someone can take away from it, which is all this time I was searching film industry, education, and I decided to go back, and I didn't have, I'd spent my college money in my young years. I went to Bible college, ironically, and studied religion and theology. And I was still paying for those student loans. I didn't want to get more. And I said, best way for me to do this is to teach myself. And I don't encourage that. I say, don't spend all your, be careful how you spend your money. But I bought a camera and I got on a sailboat, and I sailed for 3 months with 2 friends, and we sailed and surfed. And I made a small little trailer at that time. And that trip and the purchase of that camera and that trailer got me the job at Nat Geo, strangely enough. And sometimes I took the hard road. I definitely pulled myself up by my bootstraps. But there's something to be said about when you want something, you can find a way. I don't want to delve too far down this world, but this culture of victimization right now wears at me. This culture of victimization wears at me, because the idea that you have been so victimized that you can't achieve what you want for your life is a fallacy. It is a fallacy. I grew up on a farm. My mom was a school bus driver. My dad worked at a steel mill, and neither had the funds to send me to college. I took out debt to go to college. I ended up studying something that I didn't at that time want to use. I could have been angry, frustrated, and felt cheated. But instead, I took out more debt, and I'm not encouraging debt, and I took out more risk that was on my shoulders, debt that I carried for 10 years to pay back, risk that I didn't make back in my career for well over a decade. I finally, a year ago, got out of my college debt, got out of my credit card debt from those investments. And here I am today, and it's easy to look at the accolades and go, oh, you've got an Emmy, oh, you've achieved this, oh, you've worked for this company, oh, you've gone to the Himalayas. Nobody paid me that, and I lost more money than I made, right? But I had a dream, and I didn't, and I said, I'm not going to live a life going, I've been victimized by the world. And I believe strongly in the individual's ability to surpass their suffering to achieve greatness and inspire others to do the same. And and not to spiral this off of the topic of film and the things that we love and are passionate about, but if there's not a purpose behind it, if there's not something deeper that you're learning from it, again, I might as well just be doing commercials and making girls and men look pretty and selling hairspray. And I'm fine with that. It pays the bills, but life is about having a purpose and a meaning and overcoming the suffering that we all go through to achieve goals. And so I've kind of spiraled, but that documentary that I shot on that boat that sat in a can, as they say in the film, it was in the can. It was in the can for over a decade, for 15 years, and I released it last year. And then I was lucky enough after 15 years, and that's the poster behind me. I was lucky enough after 15 years to show it at the Santa Cruz Film Festival in Santa Cruz, California, with a group of maybe 100 people, but more importantly, about 20, 30 of my closest friends, that 3 of them that had been on that trip with me, and kind of enjoy that moment. And yeah, so that's kind of a little of my history and my experience and kind of the purpose that drives me behind it.
I love the purpose emphasis, and it, reminds me of Viktor Frankl's famous book, Man's Search for Meaning, where he says, whatever happens to a person, the one thing that can never be taken from you is the attitude with which you approach the difficulty that you're in. And of course, here's a man who survived Auschwitz. We're not talking about surviving Auschwitz, but we're talking about the necessity of purpose and meaning. And, you're driving home an important point for everybody here, man. This is really important.
Well, I mean, I think, what's important is your outlook on life. And I love that book. I referenced it recently in a meeting, and I love that book. I love, one of the highlights that I loved, and I feel like it's appropriate to a time like this, is the people that kind of overcame, the people that survived were not the people who hoarded unto themselves. Right. They were the people that gave. When they had bread, they gave their bread. They often gave the bread that they have to eat away to the most hungry and the weakest.
Yes.
And sometimes those people that were the weakest ended up passing, even though they had given them the bread. But those that were willing to give survived. And I think, I do think, filmmaking is fun. It's exciting. It's kind of, is it really a career sometimes? When I know my father worked his tail off, my uncles were farmers and worked their tail off. And I know men and women day in and day out work hard. And so for me, if I'm going to choose to do something that's entertaining, I want it to give back to people. And the one thing that good filmmakers, good documentary makers do is they look and they go, how can I elevate society? What can I do to bring people up, to give them some light, to inspire them to do better, to achieve more with their life? Because man, I just look around and I'm not angry about the campaigns of victimhood as much as I'm sad for the people that buy into them, because they're only cheating themselves. They're only cheating themselves.
Well, it's really great to hear these kinds of comments. They're really powerful, coming from somebody like you who has literally been there and done that. That's really important ideal. We had talked earlier about the Emmy. Why don't you tell everybody about where you won that and for which film, which one of the documentaries did you win it?
The Emmy here, I'll move my head a little bit there. I'll give it a little plug. It's on that side. Or wait, I get confused on the camera. I am proud. I'm proud of it. It's, I kind of go between being proud of it and bashful. It is a great achievement. I mean, when you work hard for something, I think, and this is valuable. Here's what's valuable about this. And I mentioned to this, I'm going to grab this. So I'm going to grab this little, if for those who are watching, and those who are listening, I got in my hand in a,
there you go.
A little book, and it's in a frame. And I put it in a frame about 2 years ago, and I put it in a frame to celebrate it. And if you look in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see an award. I won that award in 5th grade for writing this book. But what's more important is you should know how horrible of a writer I was historically, how horrible of a speller I was historically. My grammar was pathetic. And while and I still struggle day in and day out. And about 2 years ago, I decided to put this in. I decided to put this in a frame. I decided to celebrate a moment of greatness that I had previously been bashful about. And the reason why is because I worked really hard on that. And for years after that, I never worked that hard to achieve something and put that much risk into something. And I discounted that as luck or a teacher that just kind of helped me get there, instead of saying that was my hard work. That was my hard work that got there. And the reason that's important is because it's the same thing with that Emmy back there. Is it's less about that thing that sits on that's heavy and looks pretty and all that stuff, and more about the risk that it took. I was scared to death to apply. I was with the Pistons at the time. I had worked hard on this documentary about Kyle Singler and Kevin Love. Kevin Love played with LeBron James in the Cleveland team when they won the championship a few years back. Kyle Singler at that time was playing with, for those basketball fans out there, was playing with with Kevin Durant. Am I saying that right? I think I am. And the Thunder, the Oklahoma City Thunder. And unfortunately, they got knocked out before the finals. It would have been awesome if they had came back and Kevin Love and Kyle Singler would have met in the NBA finals. But the documentary was about them in high school because they had a runoff year after year after year in high school. But it was also about Kyle Singler overcoming his challenges as a kid from a small town that worked tail off and had one person that cared about him. And this speaks to the value of teachers, and this goes to this book and the value of teachers. And I think we need to, in this day and age, with all the struggles we're having, teachers should be more recognized and more rewarded and more appreciated. And the reason they should be paid better is not because we want to just throw money away. It's because of the value of what they're giving to society. And now we're seeing the dangers of not paying them well. We're seeing the dangers in universities of not taking care of our teachers, not caring about what they're teaching our youth and our college students. And we're seeing it in the movements across the nation that people are most scared about. So if you want to do something about it, get behind your teachers, get behind your professors, think about what they're teaching, get involved. That's the place to start. But I'm circling around a lot of topics here, but I did want to emphasize those things and take this opportunity. But Kyle Singler overcame a lot and won those championships. And so we applied for that when I was with the Pistons, and I was scared to death. And when I won it, I was completely surprised and in awe and shocked. And again, it was another one of those things that for a long time I kind of hid in the basement. I was ashamed of it. And then I was like, you know what? When you work hard and achieve something, you have the right to be proud of it. Mm-hmm. You have the right to be proud of it. And not because you want others to feel less, but because you want to inspire others to be more, right? This flattening of the curve, this equality of outcome stuff frustrates me, because what you're actually doing is you're saying those who work the hardest don't deserve the rewards that go with that work. Mm-hmm. And what that does is it brings us all down. It doesn't bring us up, it brings us all down. And it's important to me that I enjoy the moments that I can celebrate, and I work to say, hey, you can do it too. You can do it too if you work hard, if you put your nose to the grindstone. And maybe for you, it's not Mount Everest. Maybe for you, it's a smaller hill. Maybe for you, it's just that little playground at the end of the park, and you climb to the top of that hill, and that's your moment. Celebrate that. And that's what this book's about. That's what fifth grade, that star is about. That's the playground. That's the first step. You know what I mean? That's the small hill. And you go, I'm going to celebrate that hill. And when I get there, I'm going to look for the next one. You know what I mean? Because what it is people all come from an origin, and you don't get to change that origin. You get to accept it and grow from there. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about that. And I guess that relates to this because it's the arc of the playground to a mountaintop, maybe you might say. But it's all about those baby steps in the middle and celebrating your achievements as the individual. So,
well, I want to say here to all of your comments about teachers. Thank you very much. For Robin and I, we put in over 60 years of our collective lives together to be teachers. And, we're still both invested in it, both in the classroom. And you're right. They are the people that make a huge amount of difference in this particular culture. And I'm also grateful for you hitting the emphasis on making sure that there's a difference between opportunity and outcome. And that is a big deal of difference there. The difference between equality and equity, and we won't get into the deep weeds on any of that stuff, but I absolutely agree with you. I think that's really crucial. If we actually practiced equality of outcomes with everything, there would be no Super Bowl. We wouldn't have a winner of the Super Bowl. I mean, how ridiculous would that be? Everybody gets a Super Bowl ring at the end. Seriously?
Well, the kudos goes to you for teaching and the sacrifices that you've made and that you only know for teaching. And you've impacted my life. I wouldn't be here having this conversation with you if you hadn't. And we sat, and I was so honored to sit with you when I met you in Indianapolis. And you took time to come to me, and you took time to take notes. That stuff means something.
Yeah, it does.
It means something. And every teacher that you're listening to this, they should know this. I sat with a fifth grade teacher the other night, and we were sitting at a dinner, and I wanted to just relish and let them know, like, I remember those moments. And what teachers teach is important too, and us and parents being aware of that is important. And you were saying something else, and my mind is skipping. You went from teaching to equality of outcome, and it's a tough topic. It is a tough topic, and and this isn't to say that life isn't fair, and this isn't to say that that there isn't bad stuff that happens. It's only to say that if I were carrying a toolkit, and I could offer you a tool, I would say don't pick up, or if I could tell you what tool not to use for the job, the tool I would say not to use for the job is don't pick up the tool of victimization. It's not going to get you where you want to go. It's going to keep you right where you are. You might get something from it. It might give you something, and whether that's financial reward, whether that's people feeling sorry for you, whether that's something that you will get something from feeling victimization, but it will not be, and I can guarantee you, it will not be the things that you can give yourself with other tools. And so that, for me, it's not. I'm not here to argue about like there are bad stuff that happens. People have bad starts to life, and life is not fair. Let's all agree on that, and let's go for it.
And there you go. Let's go forward from there. And that's what I wanted to ask next, which was, what is your next project? What's coming up for you in the future?
That's a good question. I told you just before we jumped on that I moved to Florida.
Yeah. I've
been in the Detroit area for 8 years. Moved down here, a little bit warmer weather, get closer to the ocean, get my son in some salt water. I spent my 10 years in California, and I just had to get back to it. I've been connecting with the local community around here, you know, and talking recently today. I even talked to a guy who's a surfer, and we were brewing back and forth on some different ideas. And you know, for a while, I'm a U.S. Army veteran as well. Served from '92 to '98, and then 2 years inactive, '98 to 2000. And I am touched by the service and the struggles with PTSD with our soldiers returning home, and a lot of the issues with suicide. I have been collecting for a long time an archive of resources of groups that are helping those soldiers, from this group called Military Mobility that takes soldiers out 4x4ing in the Moab Desert, and they rebuild the camaraderie, and they bring these guys together and give them an opportunity to talk through the things that they're struggling with. I know I met recently with a group here that does burials and ceremonies for veterans that are dying, and they're with them in their last hours. And sometimes for special groups of veterans, they'll even fly them to DC and give them an experience at the War Memorial in DC. And I know a guy out in California. He has the big green bus, and they do a bunch of stuff for veterans. And during the pandemic, I drove across the country and ran and filmed the country empty, because I was fascinated by the mass conformity and willingness to accept the you know, and that's not to say it's fake. It's just I was just fascinated by it, and I wanted
Empty
to film
America, right?
Empty America. And I filmed that recently, but I also met some veterans during that trip that touched me. So I've been chipping away at a project with veterans, and maybe some.
Just to interject here, one little idea, just because you know you and I both love film, and I just happened to see this within the last year. There's a documentary entitled "Five Came Back," about five filmmakers in the 1940s that went to war in World War II. It was on Netflix, as I recall. I think Capra was in that. Houston was in it. So you might want to check that out. Five Came Back, and it talks about some of the stuff that they weren't telling the American public at that time, which was about PTSD and other things. Just something for you to think about in the future.
A resource. I will check it out. That's a great resource, and you know, those are the things that I've been doing, and what, you know, right now I'm just kind of open. I'm trying to be open. The PTSD thing has been on my mind, but I'm regrouping, and I'm also working on my book. I'm starting to put together a biography about the lessons of an unknown adventurer. The tools that we have to pick up and put down in life to kind of move forward, and in the most successful fashion. So I'm actually announcing that in a blog post in about a week, but I'm saying it here first. And that's the other reason I'm celebrating this book. I'm back on the Space Coast, and just south of Cape Canaveral. The 5-year-old boy, first boy in space, is now on the Space Coast and working on his neck. And I feel like it's some sort of an omen, not to be too wishy-washy, but 5th grade.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
that's just honestly really cool. I was so pleased when you sent that picture to me today to help, you know, publicize this broadcast here this evening. You know, honestly, we're coming down to the end here of 30 minutes, and I just want to give you the last 30 seconds or so to you know, say something about your work, your life, something you want people to remember, whatever you'd like to say.
Yeah, using the last 30 seconds, I would say faith. Faith is a big part of right now. We're struggling. There's a lot of unknown. And the way to survive the unknown is faith. And what faith requires you to do is live in the moment. But faith also allows you to go into the unknown and bring something known that you can share with people to give them hope. And right now, the biggest lesson that I've taken away from the hardship of the unknown and kind of the challenges of COVID is staying present, having faith that you are going to be taken care of, and knowing that while you can't forecast the future, there's someone bigger, albeit God, that's going to take care of you, that's going to help take us all through this time. So, you know, the last piece that I would say is and that goes with your hopes and your dreams and the things you want to achieve in life. If you don't have faith, if you can't apply faith in that, you know, you're going to struggle taking that first step.
Barry, thanks so much for joining us here tonight. Really grateful for this. This will be up on the Comenius website. People can see it there. The MP3 audio will be also available. Thanks so much again for the evening, and appreciate it a lot.
I'm giving you a big hug right now.
Back to you, brother.
You look great. You look great. I hope to see you in person soon.
Oh, that would be lovely. Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody, for joining us tonight.
Thank you.